Psalm 22 verses 4 to 5. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. Introduction. Trusting in the God who delivers. Have you ever faced a moment of deep despair, wondering if God was truly there? In difficult seasons, it's easy to feel abandoned. Yet, Psalm 22 verses 4 to 5 reminds us of an unshakable truth. God has always been faithful to those who trust in him. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. These words were written by David during a time of deep struggle. But even in his pain, he acknowledged God's faithfulness throughout history. Today we will explore the meaning and historical context of this psalm, a real-life story of someone who placed their trust in God and saw his deliverance. Biblical examples of those who trusted God and were saved. A powerful parable illustrating unwavering faith in God's provision. Practical steps to strengthen our trust in God's faithfulness today. Story number 1. The woman who clung to God's faithfulness. Rebecca was a mother of 3, living in a small town. When her husband lost his job, financial hardship struck their family. Bills piled up, food became scarce, and hope started to fade. She cried out to God, but no answer seemed to come. One evening, as she sat with her children, she remembered Psalm 22 verses 4 to 5. The same God who delivered Abraham, Moses, and David was the same God who could deliver her. Instead of giving in to despair, she chose to trust. She continued praying, believing that God had not forgotten her. A week later, an unexpected opportunity arose. Her husband received a job offer from a former employer. The financial storm didn't disappear overnight, but step by step, God provided. Rebecca's story teaches us. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Deliverance may not come instantly, but faith sustains us in the waiting. Trusting God means believing that his faithfulness never changes. What does this psalm teach us? 1. God is holy and worthy of praise. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. No matter our situation, God's holiness remains unchanged. Praise shifts our focus from problems to the greatness of God. 2. God has always delivered those who trust in him. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. The history of God's people is filled with stories of rescue and provision. When we trust in God, we align ourselves with generations of believers who have seen his faithfulness. 3. Trusting God requires surrender. Trust isn't passive. It's an active decision to believe even when circumstances seem hopeless. Faith isn't about seeing immediate results, but holding on to God's promises. Biblical examples of God's deliverance. 1. The Israelites at the Red Sea. When Israel stood trapped between Pharaoh's army and the sea, fear took over. But God parted the waters, showing that deliverance often comes when we least expect it. Exodus 14 verses 13 to 14. Lesson. God's timing may not be ours, but his deliverance is certain. 2. Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel's trust in God never wavered, even when he was thrown into a den of hungry lions. God shut the lions' mouths, proving that faith in him brings supernatural protection. Daniel 6 verse 22. Lesson. God defends those who remain faithful. 3. The early church under persecution. In the book of Acts, believers faced imprisonment, suffering, and even death. Yet, they continued to trust in God's faithfulness, and the church grew stronger despite opposition. Acts 4 verses 29 to 31. Lesson. God's deliverance isn't just about escape. It's about strength through trials. Parable. The man in the storm. A farmer once lived in a valley where storms were common. One night, a fierce storm struck, flooding the fields and threatening his home. He prayed for God's help. As the water rose, a neighbor came by and said, "Come with me to higher ground." The farmer refused, saying, "God will save me." Later, a rescue team arrived in a boat, but again the farmer declined, repeating, "God will save me." Finally, a helicopter hovered over, offering a final chance of escape. Still, the farmer refused, trusting that God himself would intervene. The flood took his home, and he barely survived. When he finally met God in heaven, he asked, "Lord, why didn't you save me?" God smiled and said, "I sent a neighbor, a boat, and a helicopter. Why didn't you trust my provision?" Lesson. God's deliverance comes in different ways. Our job is to recognize and trust his help. How to strengthen our trust in God's deliverance. 1. Remember how God has helped you before. Keep a journal of answered prayers and past victories. 2. Read stories of God's faithfulness in the Bible. Meditate on stories like Joseph, Moses, and Paul. 3. Declare God's promises daily. Speak verses like Psalm 22 verses 4-5 to remind yourself of His faithfulness. 4. Praise God even before the answer comes. Worship is an act of faith. It shows trust before we see results. 5. Surround yourself with people of faith. Join a faith-filled community that will encourage you in difficult times. Have you experienced a moment where God delivered you in an unexpected way? Share your testimony in the comments. Subscribe for more powerful Bible insights. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.